What are some of the biggest college basketball matchups to watch for the 2022-2023 season? Find out coming up on Locked On NBA Big Board.
You are Locked On NBA Big Board, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? Welcome back to Locked On NBA Big Board. It's been a little bit since you last saw us. My name is Richard Stamen. You might know me better as at MavsDraft on Twitter. Let me get some of our names pulled up here now that we're in the right order. If you were watching the last week when we ranked our top 5 front courts in college basketball, I had this completely backwards. We are back to being Richard Stamen as at MavsDraft and Leif Thulin to being at Leif Thulin on Twitter. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And again, if it means a lot just listening to us in the absolute dog days of the summer and off season. Right now, there's nothing happening. Like, we are looking at Colin Sexton is still a free agent. Outside of that, what's been the most exciting thing over the last week, and excluding KD, because that stuff's juicy, but the stuff that might actually pertain to us here at NBA Big Board, talking NBA draft, college basketball, international ball, anything, it's really just been not a ton. So really appreciate you sticking with us as we find more content to dig up and talk about. If you're not following us or subscribing us on YouTube, it would mean a ton if you could. We're still trying out here to beat some NBA team accounts on follower accounts. So you don't need to do anything. Just subscribe, not even like, share, just subscribe, the traditional, lingo. But my name is Richard Stamen. I'm at MavsDraft on Twitter. I'm joined by the great Leif Thulin, one of the biggest college basketball junkies, I guess is the right word for him. He knows a ton. We're going to talk about some of the big games coming up in this year's college season and a non-conference. Leif, what's going on?
Doing well. I'm busy with a couple jobs right now, but always got time to talk about college basketball. Never too early to give some previews.
Yeah, let's dive right into it. Why don't you kick it off? Let's talk about some big games in the non-conference, because I think every year there's like the Champions Classic, I think is the one it's called, and it feels like it's always one of the Blue Bloods playing. What do you have going? What do you see as the best non-conference game right now?
The Champions Classic certainly is one of the best ones, and that, for those of you who are unfamiliar, that's when Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan State, and Duke play, and they always rotate opponents, and that's always the first kind of week or two of the season, and so it really gives you this awesome event to kick off. We'll see the Blue Bloods live play against one another and really have a litmus test for how good these teams are. And the winners of this year's Champions Classic, Duke beat Kentucky and Kansas beat Michigan State. They were both Final Four teams. And so that is always a good litmus test. But the one I wanted to talk about, I think, is the biggest, most marquee matchup this year, and that's Gonzaga and Kentucky. They're playing in Spokane, but not at the Kennel. They're playing at Spokane Arena, which holds double as many people as the Kennel, which, I kind of wish they were playing at the Kennel. A home and home is supposed to be a home and home. But that's a new home and home where next year they'll be playing at Rupp Arena. And Mark Few and John Calipari made that happen literally on the phone, they said. But that's the game. They've got the two best players in college basketball, to my mind, in Drew Timme and Oscar Tshiebwe battling against one another. It's a marquee matchup. There's some decommitments. Nolan Hickman was supposed to go to Kentucky, went to Gonzaga. There's some new faces on each team that are the star in different roles than they did in previous years. And I really am excited for that, and we're going to get to it later, but Gonzaga is going to be a recurring theme in this list because they schedule a very difficult non-conference, which I think compensates nicely for playing in a non-Power 5 conference, though an improving WCC.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up their conference schedule that they've shown so far. And they've already released their conference schedule. They haven't released their non-conference, which is kind of interesting, or at least on their website. But I know I've seen some games. Like you said, they are not scared to schedule big games because they have to. Like, that's just kind of the nature of being a powerhouse in a mid-major conference, is you get some of those. And I think you almost have to. And it's Duke Gonzaga, right? It's the one you said.
Kentucky and Gonzaga.
Kentucky, Duke excuse me. Yeah, I know Duke has a big game, and I'm scrambling because I had it, which game they had, and now it's actually, actually it is the Champions Classic. So just actually kind of feeding off of, we'll talk about Kentucky for a second. I mean, the Kentucky roster is really good. It's a lot of guards. Gonzaga with Strother, and I drew a blank again. Nolan Hickman. I think Nolan Hickman's in for a really good season. That's going to be a really good test. And while it is the first game of the season, it actually holds a lot of weight because if you look at what Kentucky has done almost 2 of the last 3 years on my count, the 2019 opener, where, I mean, I think they played, might have been Duke
They
that
played
year.
Duke in the Champions Classic and got
And
ran out of the gym by Zion and RJ.
yeah, and that held a lot of weight. Like you heard on draft night, people were like, well, he played poorly in the Champions Classic, even though it was the first game of the year. So these games hold weight. And then you look at what happened last year, where I also think it was Kentucky Duke, and like guys like Trevor Keels had a really good game. They hold a lot of weight because they are big games, even though like the actual chemistry and just the team function is not there nearly yet. So like you have to account for how much these games weigh. My pick is it goes to November 15th, so second week of the season. I said Duke because that was on my mind. Duke versus Kansas will be a really, really good game. I think you're going to get a high-level prospect matchup there. You got MJ Rice, Grady Dick on Kansas. I really like those guys. I think they're going to be NBA players. And then on Duke, I mean, they are just ridiculously stacked. I think Duke is probably the best, second best. They're a top 3 team in college basketball, just talent-wise at the very least. But it's going to be a good test for some of those guards like Dariq Whitehead. I think versus MJ Rice will be a nice marquee matchup. Tyrese Proctor as well. It's one of those where it's those guys' first chance on a national stage. You look at the first 3 games, one of them is an exhibition. So first 2 games are Jacksonville and South Carolina upstate. That's not exactly tough competition. But I really like the Duke-Kansas game. Is there anything you're looking forward to in that game?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how Kansas rebuilds, and they have a good roster coming back. They also brought in Kevin McCullough from Texas Tech, who's been an all Big 12 performer. And then Jalen Wilson is primed to be the best player on that Kansas team after playing kind of third fiddle, maybe even fourth fiddle on the championship team. I'm curious to see their rebuild. And then obviously Duke, it's always how well the freshmen play initially. And you mentioned Trevor Keels. I think if Trevor Keels hadn't have had a monster performance where he scored 25 points and defended Ty Washington as well as he did, I don't think he was draftable. Not because of his traits weren't good enough, but I think he would have come back to school. But that carried so much weight. Another example of the Champions Classic carrying weight is that Tyrese Maxey had a monster performance against Michigan State. Struggled shooting the ball the rest of the year, but he was on display. He kind of slipped in the draft, but it weighed in my mind enough to have Tyrese Maxey well higher than where he was drafted. And right now, Tyrese Maxey is really good. Jabari Parker and Andrew Wiggins in 2014 played against each other, and that was the debate. It's like, well, Jabari played better, but Kansas won. Andrew Wiggins ended up going 1, and Jabari with some health injuries. But it really does play a factor. Another one, while we're talking about some of these marquee programs, it's hard to overlook some of those Thanksgiving tournaments, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I think Indiana and Kansas, while we're talking about Kansas, Indiana and Kansas, kind of these old school blue blood traditional powers. This year, Indiana's a bit resurgent, led by Trace Jackson Davis, Xavier Johnson, Race Thompson, and they'll be playing at Allen Fieldhouse, which is, in my opinion, the best environment in college basketball. And Kansas is also hosting Kentucky later in the season for the Big 12 SEC Championship. So those are the 3 marquee ones for one of the Bane Blue Bloods and the defending champion, the Kansas Jayhawks.
Yeah, Kansas is going to be in a tough situation. I don't think they repeat. I think that's pretty well known. It's going to be an uphill battle. But I think they're still a tournament team very safely. They'll compete for the Big 12 title just like every other year. They're going to have somebody emerge as a budding star for them. They'll still be really good, and they're well coached, and I think it's going to be a test at the very least, even if the talent doesn't match up for draft-wise. You're looking at some guys being really just execution. Like Kansas executes. That's why they won the title. They don't stray away from their game plan. And that's actually a test that draft prospects have to face that we don't really talk about a lot is the team element. How are they, when coaching gets in the way, like from the other side, when they're game planned against hard, how do they counter? Not just like, hey, how do they react to one-on-one defense? But genuinely when the other coach is trying to take them out, that's huge. So that's a really good point. Kansas has a good schedule. Almost always does, it feels like. But we'll be talking about some more. But first, let me tell you about Built Bar. If you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor. It's delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right, Built Bar has done it again. Let me introduce you to your new favorite, cookie dough chunk puffs. and they have a light and chewy texture. I've actually already gone through my box I got like last week. They're real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. All of the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it, and it's healthy for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein. So go to built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It'll be the perfect treat, or you can find a really good hiding place and just keep them all for yourself. It's kind of what I do, even though I live alone. I don't let anybody near them. If people are coming over, that's my stash. So like all Built bars, though, they're the new cookie dough. The new cookie dough chunk puffs is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and tasty. It's chocolate covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. It is so good. What's great about Build is that all their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good for you, tastes good and is good for you. You're going to love the new cookie dough chunk puff. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just need to grab a quick bite, Build is the perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar. Grab yourself a Built bar. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order for an exclusive offer. Use promo code LOCKED15. So my name is Richard Stamen. I am joined by Leif Thulin. He is one of the biggest college basketball junkies in the land. You can find him on Twitter, always tweeting about it. I'm MavsDraft. I am credentialed at TCU. So I figured, let's talk about TCU. Actually, they don't have a crazy schedule by any means, but they have some interesting games. I think one that I'd want to talk about here is they have a midseason tournament in November. They play either Clemson or Iowa. And we've talked about TCU a decent amount on here. I know Leif was at the game against Arizona, so I've turned him into like a TCU expert at this point. We talk about them a lot, just like what could go wrong, what can go right, all this stuff. We'll probably eventually even do a preview episode just for TCU. So if you're a Horned Frog fan, come October, we'll probably do that. But they have a big game against Iowa. I really want that matchup to happen. I think there's like a certain set of pretty much both teams have to win, to my understanding. It's not that crazy. And I'd really like to see that. Chris Murray versus Eddie Lampkin, really even Chuck O'Bannon. TCU is a defensive juggernaut at this point. I think they will be, at least. Like, they just keep getting him better and better. And like, I really like Rondell Walker. He'll make them even better. It doesn't really affect Chris Murray. I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but they're very sound fundamentally on both ends of the floor. And I'm interested to see how Chris Murray plays against them, because Chris Murray is somebody who I've started seeing as a top 30 prospect for this year. His brother was just drafted top 5. So there's obviously a lot of hype around him. Really curious how he looks there. And then also how Mike Miles looks, because Iowa, correct me if I'm wrong, Leif, Iowa's still like a decently veteran team, especially at guards. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I can't remember their guard situation exactly.
They lost Jordan Bohannon, who had been there for 6 years, and he played in all 6. I just want to clarify that he's the all-time leader in games played in the Big Ten. And but the thing about Iowa is they always have experienced players. They have both McCaffrey brothers. They have Chris Murray. They have Peyton Sanford, who's going to be one of the best shooters. He's going to be like Joe Wieskamp 2.0 at Iowa. And they'll be up tempo and play to the strengths of what Keegan Murray did, and they'll emulate it with Chris Murray. That'll be a really interesting game. And I mean, early on, obviously things can change. I'd lean towards TCU winning that one. TCU is also coming to my hometown and playing Utah. Not that that's a terribly intriguing game, but I'll be there. And I'm a Horned Frog guy now. I watched their 2 games against Seton Hall and Arizona, and I was really impressed with Coach Jamie Dixon. This is a team that I know Richard talks about them a lot, and it's because he's credentialed there, but he knows what he's talking about. This team is going to be probably a top 20, top 15 team all season long and could contend in the tournament. Yeah,
TCU is, I mean, they're going to be good. And while we're here, I'll really relay, I'll dig a draft knife, I guess, through this. Is you look at Mike Miles, he's definitely their NBA prospect. I don't know how many NBA prospects they truly have on TCU, but they have a lot of pros at the very least. I'd say at least 3 off the top of my head. I think Rondell Walker's one. I think Damian Ball's one, and Mike Miles, without a doubt. What's so appealing about Mike Miles, and I'm actually going to look up his birthday because I know it's this month. He's still 19 years old till the end of August. He just finished his sophomore season. He is ridiculously young. So I'm not really worried about his inefficiency that he had his first 2 seasons. Shot under 40%. Let me just pull up the stats while I'm just talking. But He averaged 15 points a game this last year, 38% shooting, 29.5% from three, 76% from the line. Not that efficient. I completely acknowledge that, like, what I'm about to say, the stats don't back this up, but I think you look at the process of how he does everything, and he's gonna explode. I think he's gonna get towards 43% from the field and also 35+% from three. I don't think that's very unrealistic. His free throw percentage has always been good, 83% as a freshman. So shooting upside is there. I think personally, I know undersized guards aren't the hottest commodity. At 6'1", Mike Miles isn't that. But somebody who can be like, you look at somebody who is not a liability on the defensive end and can be super sound as both an off-ball and on-ball guard. Mike Miles is easily a top 20 prospect for me next year. I mean, young, he'll be 20 years old as what would be a rising senior that age. And he's just a floor general. I think you look at the guys like Jalen Brunson in this league, there's no reason to think he can't do that again. Like, he can't be that new version 5 years later. And Jalen Brunson's a top 15 player, maybe almost top 10 from a stacked class. This is also a stacked class. I think Mike Miles would be up there. So that's kind of a hot take. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if you wanted to list another game, because I kind of completely turned this away from the schedule and into Mike Miles talk.
I have a transition here. It's the Big 12 SEC Classic is something that, for those who don't know, they play mid-season. So this isn't early. This is where teams have already played about half their conference schedule, and they play the end of January. And a lot of tournaments do it. The ACC does it as well. But I've got a few games to list off on this, and I'll kind of explain why they're super significant. My favorite one, I'm just going to bury the hatchet. These are two of my favorite teams in all of college basketball, and they're going to play each other. And it's Arkansas at Baylor. They played in the Elite Eight in the year before this past one's March Madness, and I think both teams are going to be top 5 teams most of the season. Keontae George, Adam Flagler, LJ Cryer, and one backcourt, Anthony Black, Nick Smith, Jordan Walsh, kind of 1, 2, 3 for Arkansas. Obviously, Trayvon Brazile and Ricky Council, the fourth for Arkansas. This is a loaded game. I think this may be my favorite game in all of the season. Obviously, it's early, so that can change. But on a blank slate, you look at this, maybe my favorite matchup, and that's January 28th. Already kind of clear out time on the January the 28th and watch that one. Another game that's from a classic. This is another ACC Big Ten. I think Duke and Ohio State's going to be an interesting one. You've got some new players for Ohio State, and then you got the talented freshman of Duke we've already talked about. And then a couple story programs play each other, Michigan and North Carolina. Michigan's going to have high expectations. You got two high-profile big men in Armando Bacot and Hunter Dickinson battling, and that's in the first ever Jumpman Invitational, and that's obviously named after Michael Jordan, and Michigan sponsored by Jordan Brand as well. So you've got plenty of interesting. Michigan also plays Kentucky in the same month. And then do we want to talk about the tournaments, like the kind of the feast week tournaments in the next segment, or should I just kind of keep?
I was going to say, let's actually end with those. Let's talk about some of those that you brought up. I mean, Michigan versus North Carolina, you said was one?
Yes, Michigan, North Carolina, and Michigan, Kentucky.
That's going to be really good. I really, really like that, just simply because the guard matchups feel really strong. I love Kobe Buffkin. I don't know if he's an NBA guy, but he's really exciting. Him versus Caleb Love and RJ Davis would be really fun. Maybe Jet Howard, if he is. I don't know what his actual upside really is, but he's also exciting. And Hunter Dickinson versus Armando Bacot, absolute premier college basketball matchup down low. So I really like those.
Yeah, they're going to be interesting, and both those teams have super high expectations this year, and I think that always plays a factor, especially because those are in January, so these teams will have time to develop. And one more early one, I feel like we'd be kind of remiss to not mention this, is Michigan State and Gonzaga. They're playing on an aircraft carrier, much like Michigan State and North Carolina did, I want to say in 2012.
Yep.
And that'll be really cool. I'm excited to watch that one. It's a very different environment. I thought it was one of the cooler matchups in the past decade when they did that. And then Michigan State plays Villanova, which I don't think is as marquee as that sounds, but you got two premier programs. Villanova is going to have the first time facing the non-conference without Jay Wright navigating at the helm. And I'm curious to see how they adapt, especially because they have freshmen, marquee freshmen. And then Michigan State, Tom Izzo, He's got a veteran squad, and I'm curious to see if he can kind of rebuild a contender, because these past few years they've been a bit of an afterthought. They were an 11 seed 2 years ago. They were a 7 seed this past year. They squeaked by Davidson, played a good game against Duke, who made the Final Four. But I want to see if Tom Izzo can make the Breslin Center a feared place like it was for so many years in the Big Ten. And those are a couple games, and I'm sure I could list more, but those are the main marquee games that I've kind of circled on my calendar preemptively. And if you guys think I'm kind of using that as a cliche, I'm not. I really do already like book out weekends to watch basketball. So I'm very excited, and I get horribly bummed when I can't watch the games due to work.
Yeah, there's a lot of good matchups. And I think was it Texas A&M, West Virginia a few years ago, like when Robert Williams was there? I think they played on a carrier too. I'm curious what the shooting numbers look like historically on that, because I feel like outdoors just generally might be lower percentage, but who knows? We're going to talk about some of the the midseason tournaments to wrap this up. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. So let's talk about some of the midseason tournaments. There's two that really stand out. One of them's kind of more formal of a tournament than the other. The other's just kind of a little fun challenge that teams do to schedule. And I'm staying on Duke here. We keep talking about these ACC schools, but the ACC Big Ten's challenge, the game that stands out to me the most, Ohio State versus Duke. Very excited for this. Those are two teams that are absolutely stacked at young guards, really experienced guards, because you look at Ohio State, got Isaac Likely from Oklahoma State, who's one of the very best defensive players in the entire country. He is Patrick Beverly on defense with minimal offense. He is going to have it's going to be a big test for both Dariq Whitehead and Tyrese Proctor in the backcourt. Really excited for that. And then on the other end of it, Roddy Gale versus on Ohio State, somebody who could be a one and done guard versus Dariq Whitehead and Tyrese Proctor. I think that's really big chance for all of these guys to show out. And then the other one, this one's the more formal tournament, is the Jimmy V Classic. So the first game is Texas versus Illinois. That's a lot of guards too. I like Sky Clark for Illinois. He's going to go against Tyrese Hunter, Arteria Morris, Marcus Carr at Texas. But the one I really like, I think even more, is Duke versus Iowa. I keep talking about both of these teams a lot now. But just you look at Derek Lively versus Chris Murray, or even Kyle Filipowski versus Chris Murray. Duke is stacked. You could kind of just mismatch who goes against Chris Murray. I really like those matchups. I think that's going to be a premier draft game to watch, where you can have some serious takeaways early in the season. Although it's not that early in the year. I think it's when the Jimmy V Classic is? I just X out of the Duke schedule, thinking I had it because I had this up in
I think that's a mid-season tournament.
Okay, yeah. It's December 6th, so yeah, it's early.
It's early, but it's not. It's one of the games. The first weeks.
Yeah, it's one of those tournaments where you look 6 months before the draft and it still holds a ton of weight. So I know you also had some big tournament games you wanted to talk about. Which other one stand out?
I've got plenty. This is Feast Week. Everyone talks about watching football, but I watch copious amounts of basketball. And let's start with the Maui Gym Invitational. This is always a great tournament. It's in Lahaina, Hawaii. Creighton and Texas Tech in a quarterfinal. Like that legitimately could be a Sweet 16 Elite 8 game. And they're playing in a quarterfinal of a tournament. The other matchups are Louisville versus Arkansas. Arkansas, I already mentioned, I thought could be a Final Four team. Ohio State versus San Diego State. And I think that's a round of 32 type matchup happening in a quarterfinal. And Cincinnati versus Arizona. Arizona just has a number 1 seed. And Creighton, I kind of neglected to mention that I think they're going to contend for the Big East title. That's an amazing field. And so it's Creighton and Texas Tech and Louisville and Arkansas on one side. So you can see Creighton and Arkansas too, hopefuls of Final Four. I'm a little hesitant to say I believe in Creighton as a Final Four contender, but they have the talent to be so. And on the other side, you got a team in Arizona that really had that opportunity. Ohio State, we've mentioned how they're kind of a sleeper contender. And I've got another tournament that's new. It's not as established. It is the Continental Tire main event, and it's Virginia, UCLA, Baylor, and Illinois. Those are some really, really high-profile programs right now. And it's Baylor versus Virginia at 7 on ESPN2 on Friday, November 18th, and UCLA and Illinois follows that at 9:30. And that's just a game where I think you're going to see some high-profile recruits. I think Keontae George is going to have his hands full with with Reese Beekman, who in my money, and Richard and I probably disagree on this. I think Reese Beekman's the best guard defender. I have a hunch he's going to go with Eric Gaines, which I respect, but I disagree. And then you've got UCLA, who's got the two guards, Tiger Campbell and now Amari Bailey, versus Illinois. And so you got a mix of kind of rich tradition schools and some new guards there. And then the championship will be following that. So it's some really, really impressive games there. And then, of course, the battle for Atlantis is another one, but we could go on and on. Do any of those games I mentioned draw a particular intrigue for you?
Well, I like the Continental Tire main event, and shout out to Monmouth and Norfolk State also participating. But something tells me they're not going to draw as much of like a chance to win as some of the other ones. The best matchup in there that really I'm dying to see is Baylor UCLA, just to get Keontae George and Langston Love versus Amari Bailey, even Adam Bona versus Jonathan Chama-Chachua, who, by the way, super underrated draft pick, but really like your picks as well. There was one other that had stood out to me, and now I have to search and find it because it's not one. It's not a big one, but there is a draft matchup that I think people should watch. It's not necessarily they're guarding each other, but they probably will guard each other just because they switches. And that is at the Shriners Hospital's Charleston Classic. Actually, I don't know why I read with the sponsor on it, but it's a Charleston Classic. South Carolina versus Virginia Tech. That's going to be a really good matchup. I really do like Gigi Jackson, and he's going to be going against Rodney Rice. So I really like that matchup. South Carolina's Gigi Jackson, Virginia Tech's Rodney Rice. I think that has a chance to be one of the better games of that week. And I think that's also around Thanksgiving, if I'm not mistaken. I know it's like the 17th to the 20th, but I don't know when Thanksgiving is this year. That's another one to watch. Gigi Jackson, you're going to love him this year in college basketball. I think a lot of these guys who are unknowns in the next year's recruiting class and then reclassify, they make for a lot of fun just because there isn't a ton of film out on them. But I know we also have the Phil Knight Classic. Leif, you want to talk about that as well to close this out?
Yeah, this one is new. It's brand new. Phil Knight, obviously, the namesake, is the one running it, and it's all the Nike schools that you can imagine competing against each other in two separate brackets, and there'll be two champions crowned. This may be the coolest event in college basketball. It's also in Feast Week, I believe, because Thanksgiving is always on Thursday. I don't know this for sure. That the Thanksgiving will be the 24th. So this is all leading up to it. So there's the Phil Knight Invitational is one of them, and that's features schools such as Alabama, Iowa State, Michigan State, North Carolina, Oregon, Portland, UConn, and Villanova on one side. And then you have on the other side, it's called the Phil Knight Legacy Bracket, Duke, Florida, Gonzaga, Oregon State, Plymouth State, Purdue, West Virginia, Xavier on the other side. And this features games just in the quarters. There's obviously, you're going to go semifinals and finals too. This is not just a one-off. Carolina plays Portland, Iowa State and Nova. That's a sneaky good game. UConn and Oregon, Alabama, Michigan State. And then on the other side, we've got Duke, Oregon State, Florida, Xavier, which I actually am very excited for, Purdue versus West Virginia, and Portland State versus Gonzaga. And that would produce a Gonzaga versus Purdue, probably Duke versus Florida or Xavier. And they play until the finals, and you get two champions crowned to the Phil Knight Classic. Really cool new event that I am super eager to watch, and I'm hopeful that I can just kind of camp out all Thanksgiving and be undisturbed and watch, I want to say, 6 games in a row. We'll see if that happens. I'll report back, but I'm super eager for that. That Feast Week is going to be spectacular this with the Atlanta, not the Atlanta, Battle for Atlantis in Bahamas, Maui Gym, and the Phil Knight Invitational and Legacy Tournament. 4 basketball tournaments. No football will be watched by me. It's basketball week for me.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun week. November is always really fun for these midseason tournaments in college basketball. You hear about football dominating Thanksgiving, but which like rightfully so, but college basketball is really underrated in that, and it's growing, I think, in that regard of making a name for itself. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been our show talking about some of the big matchups to watch in college basketball and the non-conference as the schedules continue to come out. Usually around within the month, the whole season will be revealed, so we'll have a lot more to talk about in that regard. So that'll be really exciting. I know it's not the most exciting topic, but it is really fun to kind of see, hey, let's circle some games in advance for which matchups and draft prospects we want to see. I think it's really exciting. But If you're not subscribing to us on YouTube, would mean a lot. Again, at Locked On NBA Big Board. It's just the first thing. All you do is hit subscribe, close out of your tab, whatever it is. If you're watching on YouTube already, thank you very much. Give us a follow on Twitter with our names below at MavsDraft and at Leif Thulin. We will be back this week. Have a wonderful rest of your day.